La Lanterna, a spotlight in Italian football, is a podcast that dives into the beautiful game seen from the eyes of two fans from the oldest team in Italy's point of view. My name is Fabrizio Cardone, Canadian and Genovese, together with my friend Matt Killen, an American-born and Genoa fan. Every week, we'll tell you all you need to know about the only team you need to know about, Genoa CFC. Plus, we'll have guests and provide updates from around the magical world of Italian football. Benvenuti, welcome to La Lanterna podcast. This is Fabrizio with my best buddy,
Matt. Fabry, how are you? Happy Wednesday. We're recording on a Wednesday for everybody.
Happy hump day.
Yes.
We are here to talk about a great match, especially for the neutral anyways.
Yeah,
this was a 1-1 draw, as Rafa actually predicted. I did mention that
I also predicted a 1-1 draw.
The truthful, we all did. He did predict. He had to toot his own horns on Twitter, rightfully so, that it would have been a tie with a last-minute gasp from Napoli, which indeed that's what happened.
Ciao guys, Rafa here from last week's episode, talking about Napoli, Genoa, giving my thoughts on how the game went. I thought the game was a really entertaining game, a really good game in the midfield as well. Napoli played much better in the first half than Genoa did, although both teams had their fair share of chances. Both keepers, Meta and Martinez, had a really good game, making great saves, keeping their teams in it in the first half. Leo Orsigard yellow card would get him a substitution at the half. He's taken out by Mazzarri for Natan, and Natan made the mistake early in the second half, leading to Morten Frendrup's goal to make it 1-0. And from here on out, guys, if you're going to bet against Napoli or in a Napoli game, just look for the opposition team's player who has either never scored a goal in their career, never scored a goal in Serie A, or never scored a goal for the team, and they're bound to get their first goal with their team against Napoli. So you're welcome for that advice. But, Genoa were looking at their first win at the Maradona since February 22nd, 2009, when a Bosco Jankovic goal in the 69th minute led to a 1-0 victory by Genoa. When Cyril Ingonge took the equalizer in the 90th minute, very important equalizer for Napoli. Again, called the fact that you guys would score first. I called the late goal by Napoli. I called the 1-1. It was pretty predictable stuff from Napoli, and really needed a win here because of our situation in the table. And the result proved costly for Walter Mazzarri, who was sacked a couple days later, only 2 days before their game against Barcelona in the Champions League, replaced by Francesco Calzona, who was a former assistant to all 3 seasons of Sarri at Napoli and an assistant to Spalletti in his first season, who is also now the head coach of Slovakia and is set to lead them to Euro. So he's performing double duty and taking over Napoli for the rest of the season. Today's match against Barcelona is his first match. Yesterday's training was his first training. So it was a pretty, Genoa cost Napoli quite a bit here. So you guys should be proud of your performance. I think you guys played a hell of a game. Great second half, a lot of good counterattacks. Pretty scary for Retegui after that knock he took in the first half. I was really looking for him to get substituted. Health before everything, guys. I don't want to see anything happening to any of the players out there, especially Matteo Retegui, who should be a really good fixture for the Azzurri this summer at the Euro. Just wanted to say hey to all you listeners. And good luck to you guys as Genoa continue their push for top 10 in the table in Serie A, which would be great, seeing as how you guys just came back from Serie B. I want to say hi to Fab and Matt and wish you all the very best of luck the rest of the way this season. Forza Napoli sempre, ma also Forza Genoa. Ciao, guys.
Thank you. That was very nice of you, Rafa. So, without jumping too much ahead, it was a 1-1. How did you find, what's your comments on the match?
So this was a match that, with real time, again, I always go back to the real time reactions because I feel like they feel so different than like when we talk about it.
Should we record right after the matches? Is that what you're saying?
No, because I think it would be a very different podcast if we did. Like our group chat was. Everyone is fuming. People are cussing. What the hell? We just threw away 2 points. What's going on? Look, I sometimes get annoyed with myself with how level-headed I can get after matches like this. But like, we were pissed off that we drew against Napoli. Like, that's saying a fucking. You realize how far we've come in like 2 seasons where we were just clinging to life, like hoping to God just to stay in the top flight. And now we're in a place where we're like, what the fuck? I can't believe we dropped points against the champions last year. I mean, granted, it's different. Like, obviously Napoli, a lot of things have happened. They've now, as you mentioned earlier, they've commemorated their 3rd Scudetto with 3 coaching appointments in the same season. So it's not exactly the same Napoli as the season before. But I think overall, just to come back to your question, I think it was a match mostly well done by Gilardino and the boys. I think our game plan for about 70 minutes, as almost always seems to be the case, was really, really on point. But the usual suspects kind of hurt us in the end. We know how we play. We're not a team that's going to demand possession. We had a lot of chances conceded, especially in that second half. And when it seemed like first we had a victory we were going to snatch away from home against a great opponent, it ends up being a draw. But it's one where you got to say, like, I mean, I don't know, Fabry, it felt like one-way traffic for the last 30 minutes of that match. And it's going to happen. Someone's going to make a mistake. I was as pissed as the mistake. And I love Johan Vasquez. I still think it's mainly his error on the goal. I'm a huge Johan Vasquez fan. I know you disagree with me. We'll probably argue about this. But regardless of it, the point is, like, when you're under pressure for however long, these things happen. And then unfortunately, the other kind of sort of bad trend that we're seeing is we have changes that get made a little bit too late in the match, and you see people being brought on and maybe there's disarray and things don't really work, and or people are too tired too late and we're just responding too late. So I think all of those things are contributing factors, but at the same time, we got a point away from home at Napoli. We have 2 points from 2 matches at Napoli. If you would have told me that at the beginning of the season, I would have totally taken that deal. How did you feel about the whole thing?
I agree with you, besides the fault of pointing the fingers to Vasquez, but I'll get to that in a second.
Yeah,
I think you're right. Gilardino has appointed the match perfectly, at least for a good 70 minutes out of the 90. But at the same time, we are still getting these goals at the last minute. And even though Gilardino in a press conference, he did say, well, it doesn't matter. It does matter. That means that there is something that needs to definitely be worked on. Now, having said that, we are all pro Gilardino. I want him to sign in and have a very long longevity with us. But definitely he needs to grow. There's a lot of things that he needs to focus on. And one of them is perhaps prepare better in the dying minutes of what it should look like. Perhaps less total defense and maybe, I don't know, something. I'm not the expert with that perspective, but obviously one obvious thing is we have put that on pause to get conceding these goals in the last minute. I'm not factoring in Atalanta because that was a totally different story. But again, we're having that goal at the end. In this case, was also at the 90th minute. So kudos to Gilardino to have prepared an amazing match. We have, as you said, tied 2 times the Campioni d'Italia. I still think it's a very strong team. They're obviously lost in focus, lost in, I don't know, as even Rafa said, it's perhaps like what's the word I'm looking for? Trying to sober up, I suppose, from last year. But at the same time, the talent is still there. Most of the players from last year are there. So I think it's just a mentality thing, hopefully for them with the new appointed coach. So that's another thing that we have to feel for is either they were expecting, not looking at what we have done so far in the championship, thinking that Genoa would have been an easy walk in the park, and Mazzari got sacked. So if he got sacked for a 1-1 against us, it's either they were thinking that we were not that much, or it was just enough with this nonsense, looking only at, from their perspective, of a very mediocre match. Not to mention, though, that the mediocrity also can have been just because of how the opponent team, meaning us, has put the players on the pitch and all the tactics around that. The tie was, at the end, fair. I guess similar to the first leg, it hurts, it bites, as you also mentioned, the fact of feeling the taste, getting the taste of the 3 points and then always losing it towards the end. On the first leg, we were okay with it. 2 great goals by 2 great champions. This time around, this Ngonge, which, I personally don't know him very well, but he definitely did a great goal. But at the same time, they were pressuring us, and to your, I'm just using your, more or less your words, is eventually when it's a numbers game, you start to shoot and shoot and shoot. Eventually, one mistake is going to happen, because that can only happen by mistakes or by some clever shot from distance, like a Malinowski type of shot that you can't do anything about it.
Yeah, I think it was an unfortunate end to the match. It's something when we're constantly behind the 8 ball in terms of pressure, things can happen. Martinez bailed us out multiple times in the match, which is something we forget about. When you have a lead going into extra time, you don't think about, this could have been 2-1 Napoli or something like that, but it could have. And Martinez came in big. Our defense largely was really solid. For me, I think it's still an error of communication, particularly damning in my opinion, because it's a center back. And as much as I've said, I would wear Vasquez on the back of my shirt. I love him as a player, but I just don't think his response to that moment was correct. And to be fair, it's a split decision that he has to make. He's got to decide, okay, my fullback on the left side is a step behind. The ball is coming in and there's a cross. You can let that fullback try to catch up and let the angle and the keeper do the work for you. He chose instead to go towards the ball instead of his man. Ball comes back to his man, which he's now out of position for, and that's where the goal is. So that's why I think it was on him for that to have happened. Granted, it's a fast decision that needs to be made, and he had another player that was beaten that he tried to respond to. But I think when you're in that position, you have to understand, you have to stay in your place and stand your ground, because defense collectively is only as strong as where the team is going in at. And if you have people breaking line, that's always when things are a problem. But at the end of the day, it was several chances on goal that led to that moment of breakdown. And I think if there's anything, I'm more upset a little bit about our substituting plans and tactics than I am about that particular moment, even though I do think it was an error that led to a goal.
Let's backtrack 1 second before we analyze a little bit more thoroughly of this goal. First half ends 0-0. We just talked briefly about it, you and I, before we started recording. I think it was almost level with respect to the quality and the possible, I would say, chances. On the paper, we have more chances on goal, but the possession, similarly to the end of the match, was 71 for Napoli versus the 29 for Genoa. And that shows the kind of approach that Gilardino has made, more on a defensive rather than on the offensive. But again, one thing is playing against Atalanta, one thing is against Napoli. 2 different type of styles, 2 different type of players. So I think it justified that, even though we do this type of style of defensiveness, we saw that more in the beginning of the campaign, and we kind of haven't seen that in a while. We may have seen it in moments, sporadic moments here and there, but this was, I guess, the biggest upset, I guess, from most of our fans that we're talking about. But in the second half, we come very strong after the break. Again, Gilardino, great strategic person that talks to the players, and God knows what he says on the bench. In the locker room. And then when they come out, the team is totally reborn, refreshed. It's almost like we need a break just before the end of the match to help us for always those 9 minutes. That's what happened when we have that chance with Frendrup.
It was just wonderful. I mean, what's really great about it, watching it again, it was kind of a nice little team goal too. Like it started actually from Martinez out of the back, if I'm not mistaken. And we kind of really quickly moved the ball up the pitch. Ultimately, you've got Frendrup who's kind of coming and running in, and it's a little bit of a farther kind of outside type of a shot. But it's the passage of play really quickly from a number of players on the Genoa side that make this an opportunity. I don't think this was just a random, I mean, of course it wasn't a random hack at the ball that ended up being a great goal. This was actually a team movement. And then you had Frendrup just perfectly strike it and kind of get into a position where he could do so without really being pressured. And it gives us the lead. It was amazing. I mean, how would you react to it?
It was good to see, starting all from Martinez, that strategy that we've been talking several times, where he's almost like that added valued player that is like your libero, your center back sort of strategy at the back. He brings the action to the midfield. I think it was the Messias to the right. He comes all the way down. Great match by Messias, by the way. All the way to the right.
Messias did very, very well.
To a surprise for many for his role, but that's a different story. Then he brings the ball to the center, gives it to Retegui. Retegui's trying to catch the net. Look at the ball itself. He had two players right in front of him. The ball gets pushed more towards the back. Frendrup just coming. Great shot. First goal in Serie A for our Frendrup. And that was the goal.
Retegui on the move. Junior Messias. Here is Retegui. It falls to Frendrup. First ever Serie A goal for Morten Frendrup at the Maradona against the defending champions. The man who often provides the assist for Genoa has now put them ahead.
Then we sit back. So this is one of the issues that I find with Gilardino a little bit, is while we want to point the finger at him or not, that's a different story. But obviously you're going to have to look at the responsible of the strategy to see if you can change the mentality or do something. With a match with Napoli, obviously sometimes you can win it, sometimes you don't. So what do? You do a goal and then you keep it and hold it, or you continue to play as you were playing before. Try to close the match, so getting your second one. So in the event of a possibility at the end, you still have a cushion. What do you think?
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, I understand why people would be going after him and saying, well, if you just defend. But look, what's the alternative to this? We're playing cutthroat football and we're putting another pressure on Napoli, and then we similarly get beaten on the counterattack, and then we're complaining about we're putting too much pressure. I feel like it could go either way. For me, yes, I do agree broadly. If you're asking the team to defend a lead and we're not capable of keeping chances out of our own half, then we're asking for trouble. If we're defending a lead and we're just airtight and we're taking the air out of the ball, so to speak, great. But that's not how we are. That's truthfully not how we are. We have a good defense. We have good defenders. But this isn't like 2005 Chelsea or something where we're just everyone is, as soon as we get the lead, the game is over. That's not what our team is. So I can understand from some degree, if that's the case, can you really afford to be on the back foot for 30, however many minutes it is, and hope that nothing happens?
It's possible.
It's possible, but it's risky, right? But I do think I'm somewhere in the middle. I don't think that us being uber attacking is necessarily the right thing to do right now. I don't think we have quite the side to deal with that. And I do think it exposes ourselves to risk. What I do think is that, having more cohesive changes earlier in the half, it's just something I'd like to see a little bit more of from Gila, because we've seen often lately, there have been usually a couple additions that we're subbing in the 80th minute or later of these matches. And then we seem to concede within minutes of these new substitutes coming on with some sort of regularity to that. I don't necessarily blame the goal on our substitutes in this match, but it kind of feels like if we're going to make this change in tactic, because, you mentioned the great match for the neutral. In the first half, it was pretty much neck and neck. We were going to them. They were coming to us. We were playing kind of fearless. We've seen Gila play pretty fearless before. We get the goal, and then the match kind of changes. If we need new legs to continue that game plan, or maybe to change it to be a lot more conservative, I think those movements need to happen in more unity and quicker, rather than let's just get a couple other guys in and get a couple other guys in, and then all of a sudden it feels like we're not really doing either thing.
Well, to your point, halfway anyways, the first sub came in with Malinowski and Ekuban coming in for Messias and Retegui, and that was on the 75th minute.
Yep.
So that was early enough.
I don't have any problem with that, to be honest.
The goal at the 90th. Then you get the second round of changes, which was with Vitinha that came in for Gudmundsson. And the last one, which is probably the one that was more on the word of mouth for everybody, was the sub being of Stortman and Cittadini for Badelli and Sabelli. Mostly is about the Badel one, where Badel was asking or had been asking to be subbed for quite a while. Even though he is such a great player and he still played very well, you could see that he needed like a pacemaker almost, to the fact of a tank of oxygen, and because he was just like done. So not necessarily we had his fault for the goal to have it conceded, but obviously it's part of the team. Now, before we close it with the analysis, at least from my side, to tell you why I don't think it was entirely Vasquez's fault, I wanted to mention also one thing that I don't know why the highlights are not showing it, and the commentary, at least in the English side, and I doubt even in the Italian one, because they're usually pro Big Sisters and never about the other teams, and I'm getting very peeved about that, was no one ever mentioned too much anyways about two instances that led to the action for Napoli's goal. So what happened just moments before that was a counterattack for Genoa. Vitinha had the ball and there was a foul on Vitinha. The sideline had clearly flagged the foul, while the referee called actually an offside. So that's the first one that I wanted to mention. And because of that foul, which happened more or less at the box height on the right side, if you're looking towards the attacking goal, then the foul was kicked. So the free kick at that point, when they kicked the free kick from that quote unquote foul, that was like at least 20 meters towards the center of the pitch. And you probably testify the fact that you have to do at least within a meter, max 2 from where the foul happened. So what I'm trying to say with this is it gave heads for Napoli to start, and then it came for Napoli's goal.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's splitting hairs. I know there was some question, some stuff seemed questionable, but I have a hard time looking at it and feeling like we really got screwed over.
Yeah, no, I know. Just looking at mistakes itself. Lastly, just to close it from my side perspective, why I don't think it was entirely on Vasquez is we play a zone. And at that point, it's the best player that has to go to the ball. I shared in the chat in slow motion also to show what happened there. And at that point, Ngonga came a little bit more outside of the box. And that's where he got the ball, while Vasquez was marking, as he probably is deemed to be, as a center back, or was anyways his role to be right then in that place. And similarly, I guess, to what happened with Atalanta, it was just a bet with Vogliacco, similarly but different. He didn't go on the ball, he stayed in the zone. What I'm trying to say with this, it is definitely co-participant on his fault, but if you're playing zone, it's also up to the other players to help you out.
Yeah, but what you're saying, the bringing up the Vogliacco thing makes me think, are these guys being given incorrect direction? Because there's absolutely zero chance that Aaron Martin can do anything about that play beyond recover back to his man. And so what Vasquez does in that situation is Aaron Martin gets beat. That's on Aaron Martin. He shouldn't be getting beat. But he says, I'm going to come and stop and run in front of your guy, which entirely vacates his guy, which the next guy also can't get over to because he has his man. So regardless if it's zone or not, there is no way that player can be accounted for if Vasquez steps off and steps towards, I can't remember the name of was Florenzi? I can't remember who it was that was the guy that ended up getting the ball and playing back to Ngonch. But there's nothing that can be done. It's a similar thing with the Vogliacco decision. It's like, well, Vogliacco's kind of in a zonal place, but he's not guarding anyone. And again, both of these players I really have a lot of respect for, but there is no other way based off of where they have decided to move towards that any player can do anything with that. So
true. We can continuously be, nitty-picky on every detail of the fact. I can also say while Martin was not able to get on the ball because he was on that first header that brought the ball back, but at the same time, I can say to you on the other side, you had Vasquez alone in the middle, and you had towards the left for Napoli attacking, or on the right for you defending, with De Winter and Bani together on the right side of Martinez. So, I mean, you can look at it and analyze it differently. I'm not saying you're incorrect to say that Vasquez has a part of it, but I don't think it's entirely all his fault. Just my take. All right. There's one quick thing I wanted to talk about. So on Mondays, there's this, it's actually called like our chat. It's called We Are Genoa. It's from a local TV channel. And they talk about, Genoa stuff. Mm-hmm. This time around, I didn't see it, but I heard through the grapevines, then I saw some links in what happened. Iranio, a famous player from the 90s for Genoa, of course, obviously also for AC Milan, but he was a guest on this show. And something came to light that was sort of rumored to be something similar, but now it's official. Because if a player else just says it. So what did he say? He talked about the Genoa at the time of Scuravi, at the time of Aguilera, when we were in Europe. So he talked about that the former president back then was Aldo Spinelli. So some people know him. He was famous for his yellow scarf. And he was famous because he's the one that brought Genoa to the 4th spot and brought Genoa to the semifinals of UEFA Cup, which is now the Europa League.
Yeah.
But what kind of stunned me for how he was honest about it, he is an Iranio, and he mentioned that he was a little bit behind in the payments of the salaries, and especially on the match prizes. So he had promised certain amounts of prizes per match. Genoa had gone very far within the tournament, again, to the semifinals, to the point of boycotting the team and starting to play bad, and hence that first goal against Ajax. And then they tried to recuperate a little bit, but it was too late. So long story short is most likely we were, in fact, if you go and look at the annuals and the books and so on, after that match, Genoa had a streak of losses, almost risking relegation from this great form to nothing. And that hurts to hear. That's something that, I mean, I understand, because even though, fans can point the finger saying, oh, you see, all the players are mercenaries. And they're mostly saying about it now, but these were back in the 80s as well. And while I do sympathize with the players, at the same time, as a fan, it hurts to see that something like that happened.
No, you just hate to hear stuff like that. I mean, I wonder sometimes when people say those things, like, is there some sort of ulterior motive? Is it something where, this is a person coming out and having something to say about all of this type of a thing? But
I mean, this is like 30 years ago, right?
Right. And so similarly, it kind of feels like, oh, why are you bringing this up right now, dude? But I'm with you that when you think about like what could have been and where we were, and maybe there's you could speculate all these things. I hope I don't even want to think about it, to be honest with you, because it just starts like this negative train of thinking, and it's just like, why am I doing this to myself? But it sucks. It really sucks if that's the actual reality.
Different era, different precedent, different players altogether. At the end of the season, there was also the sale of Aguilera and a whole bunch of other players. So, I don't know. It just didn't. I was glad to hear it because at least I know what happened. I'm not saying that we would have been able to arrive to the finals, but were we that weaker than Torino, who went to the finals? I don't know.
Yeah.
It would have been nice. Not saying winning, but at least arrive to the finals. But, it ended how it ended against a great team, which was Ajax. But, at the same time, it makes you wonder what would have happened.
Right. It definitely does.
All right. So let's quickly go to a break, and we'll be right back with a lot of more entertaining topics, plus the upcoming match against Udinese.
And now, a short commercial break.
Avevo Avevo voglia di Avevo voglia di
Welcome back. Bentornati to Lantana Podcast. This is part 2. Now, we don't have a special guest because it's hard to find an Udinese fan, I suppose, at least from the English fans. There are, obviously, but we're still scouting out. We have our producer that he's like our stalker and he's not helping us lately. I'm joking. Stefano, we still love you. But before we get into the talking about the next match coming up. So as I said, in Genova against Udinese, are two or three things that I wanted to talk about. So first one is regarding the stadium. So I think we mentioned a little bit earlier, but it's happening that Genova has to put forward their bid for the Euro 2032. Genova as a city, because right now the stadium, even though it was Genoa's stadium back in the day, because during the world wars, etc., they had to be under the city, it went under the city. And even though it's still being held the name of a former Genoa player, it's city owned now. So the mayor has put out their pressure on both sides with respects to co-participation or what their intentions are and so on. We very well know that both the mayor of the city and the premier of the region are both Sampdoria fans. So we know that they are going to give more attention or careful on choices and decisions. But Genoa CFC has put forward to 100 million to co-participate in the restructuring of the stadium. And Sampdoria, obviously, we know that they're still putting hands in their pockets and they can't find anything. So having said this, it's trying to say that everything is being stalled right now because of Sampdoria. I have a feeling that we're not going to get into this race, but the mayor had put a lot of pressure there, also because it's going to fall on them when it comes down to budgeting and so on. So I don't know.
I mean, like everybody, I hope we come out on top, and I hope we don't get screwed with this. You know, like it seems like there have been different moments, and I go back to like the weird legislation thing about people picketing for the Rock of Bocadase to no longer carry Rosso blue colors and all that stuff. And obviously that got thrown out, but like you hope we don't see funny business like that. I would love for the Ferraris to be our home. I personally think it's something that feels more authentically ours. Personally, I believe that way. Maybe that's a controversial statement. It's not among our fans, I know. But as you mentioned, there's not a whole lot of reason to trust that we're not going to be maybe seeing our rivals across the other side of the city get some sort of favorable support in something like this. But hopefully we do see it, and who knows how things are going to look in the future for them if they continue to kind of trudge along in Serie B or worse. But you know, I'm just hoping for the best.
We have to see what's the outcome. I'm sure they're both sides meaning the mayor, so the city and Genoa are going to have conversations with respects to looking at the worst case scenario, meaning Sampdoria not pitching in what's that going to look like. Then you get a whole bunch of different fans that really make themselves ridiculous to the point of always, this is the stadium of the citizens, so you have to protect both teams, whatever. Anyways, that's a whole different story and so on. Next one that I wanted to say is, we've heard a while back about 777 Partners, our current owners, that when they took it over from our previous owner, Preziosi, that they wanted to do something different. They wanted to do something that is investing within the city. We've started to see a lot of things slowly happening, but it's happening. A whole bunch of movement. So the shirts and so on, but we're starting to see a little bit ramping up a little bit more. We've seen different lines that have been coming out, Essential line, the Black line, or whatever those other names are. Hard for us abroad to find or to put hands on, because right now it's more focused. And I guess that's still part of the growth aspect or the build-up aspect. And what's happening here is, obviously right now, as it stands today, we have a store which is very, very small in a secondary street from the main drag, which is called Via 20 Settembre. It's in Via 12 Ottobre. It's always empty, not too much merchandising. Actually, you went to it when you went. to Genova at the
I
end
was
of
very
the season.
disappointed, as I've shared before. I went a couple times because one time I went over there and they were closed, and I came back the next day and I was visiting. This would have been in May, so it was right when I went. It would have been just after the last match of the
2022.
in 2022. Yeah, and it just seemed like there was nothing there. I mean, I'm also strange because I require a really large size, but almost all of the clothes seem to have been picked away. The home shirts were totally gone. Pretty much all that was left was the third shirt and the keeper shirts at the time.
For your information, Matt doesn't need a very extra large sizes because he's larger than taller. It's just because he's really tall and he needs a larger.
It's okay. You don't need. You don't need to. It's whatever. But yes, I'm looking for like a 3XL or a 4XL. Hard to find anything. Didn't seem like there was a whole lot there. Not a whole lot on display.
To their defense, that was also the year, that we went down, but that had nothing to do with it. But it was also the first year that the new owners came in, and they just scrapped the deal with Kappa, with the Castor coming in. So they were just changing the whole, dynamics. And they rightfully or wrongfully so, they cleared out all the inventory.
So there was still stuff there. I think the stuff that wasn't available, they genuinely sold out of, which is fine. That happens. And
the season too. Right?
It was towards the end of the season, but it was still Kappa stuff. It wasn't like the racks were empty. It just was kind of, you go there, and I was maybe one of 2 or 3 other people shopping around in the store. There were associates there, but they weren't really paying attention. It just kind of, I was going there ready to spend money, and then I kind of felt like, there's nothing really here for me. So I got like a espresso mug and fucked off. I
mean, I'm not defending them because in that perspective, they're very different to North America, but we're also used to North America, which is a little bit quite strongly different compared to how they do a lot of things, especially in the medium to smaller teams. But things are changing. What I want to say with this is they just announced today that right in the Vicoli, so in the old historic town, very close to the old port, they are going, by the next fall, they're going to open the new store, and it's going to be on 3 levels and it's 3 stories, and it's going to be quite something for the city. As going back to my original, when I first started to talk about it, for the fact of our owners that are trying to invest also within the city. So we are Genoa is Genova, and vice versa. And that's what it's interesting, because it's going to be very close to the port, so very close to the tourism and touristic area. So it's a good catch on also visitors and so on. So something to look forward for the next fall coming up. I guess we can jump into the match. Next coming up, Udinese. Now, what do you want to say about Udinese, Matt?
I mean, it's another important one for us, of course. Every single match has that kind of dynamic when we're still trying to make sure we've got a good foothold. I think the thing that's maybe sort of, I didn't really realize this until kind of coming back and looking at the table. Remember the first time we played Udinese earlier in the season, they were close towards the relegation zone. They're not exactly out of that by any stretch of the imagination, but they're actually only 2 positions behind us. Now, granted, that's a 7-point gap. We're at 12th position with 30 points. They're at 14th position with 23 points. But we're not looking at a team that's completely at the bottom and has had just an awful go of it in the campaign. I do think that it's one where obviously, we would hope that we can get something out of it. They have had themselves an okay run of form recently. I think drawing at Monza, actually recently a win against Juve, and then a draw against Cagliari. So maybe they're not playing incredibly Juve obviously was the big surprise there with their result.
In Torino too.
And yes. So, it's a team that we can't really take for granted as much as it seems like we should, I guess, is the short way I would summarize all that stuff.
This year, Udinese is a weird one. By the looks of it, if you look at a lot of matches, and I'm thinking about Inter, the match with, I would say, Lazio at home for Udine anyways, the Atalanta match, it seems like they're probably ready for relegation this year. They even lost that against many other teams. I'm thinking about also the Coppa Italia, where they lost against Cagliari, and but a lot of ties that they're pulling in. But the one that worries me are the run of form in the last 3 matches. So you get a Monza that is not on fire, but it's still that steady valid, good, strong team. So that was a tie. And the win at the Alliance Stadium, the Juventus Stadium, and then the tie at home against Cagliari. So it looks like they're not doing that super great at home, but they're doing amazingly away. Not always, obviously, but that's what I'm looking at least in the last three, because you can look at the run of form for the last five and so on, but it's the more recent one that probably counts the better. So the one that scares me is mostly what I'm saying with all this is the win at Juventus that makes me think, okay, sure, maybe Juve didn't take that too serious, but they were also trying to keep up with the run of form that Inter is doing in order to try to win this championship. So seeing that they lost against Udinese, to your point, is making me feel that there is another set of Udinese that's the one that we have to be careful of.
Yeah, and when you look at it, I mean, I think like some of these things are maybe difficult to make too many remarks from, but from a goals per match perspective, we're almost exactly identical. Through, was it 25 match weeks so far, we've had a goal 0.04 scored per match. They've had 1 goal scored per match. I think that's another thing that's worth talking about because, you know, we talk about our defense usually being pretty competent. We can score goals. Again, this isn't like seasons past where we just have no real options up front or anything like that. But we're not a team that scores a lot normally. And so it's another thing that kind of, when you look at this, well, you know, they're not exactly that different from us in that category. If you wanted to take it a step further and also look at goals conceded, we're a bit better at 1.25 goals per match, just about, and they're a little bit more at 1.5 goals per match. So I think it's going to be an interesting test for us for sure. When you look at this on paper, you've got to say that we would expect to get something out of it. But I'm also just curious to see how we focus on breaking them down, because it seems like, at least as of late, they've been operating in more of like a 3-5-1-1.
Correct.
Where they're having Tovan kind of is like the more attacking false nine type of a player. And then you've got sort of a similar back support system as what we typically have, where you've got sort of a couple players as wingbacks playing more in kind of a midfield position and tracking back, 3 more robust midfielders, and then pretty much a 3 center back group behind that. So it looks a lot to me like a stalemate. Obviously, the last time we played them, it's the same things we were griping about in Napoli sort of came up again. We scored an early goal, we concede a goal, we get up ahead, seems like we're going to have a win. And the 90th minute, we have an own goal and we end up with a draw. But when you look at kind of the way that they're made up and how they've approached things recently, I don't know. So part of this match feels to me like it could be a draw.
Before we get to the predictions, I wanted to say one more thing. I think Serie A we have seen actually Udinese in Serie A for quite a bit. It's definitely a team that is a darling for Serie A, not only because it has produced quite good players, but also a good venue for parking players from or picking players also for the bigger teams at a specific price. The Pozzo family, which are the owners of Udinese, also own other 2 teams, the Granada and the Watford. That's right. And it's a smaller version, more or less, differently, because the structure is very, very different compared to ours is more like independent yet under the same owner. There it's all about, I'm gonna guess that this is how it works, but it's more about Udinese, and the other ones are more satellites. But, you know, I'm guessing this, so I don't quote me on it. But it seems like it's unlikely, at least on the paper, that Pozzo will allow his team to go and be relegated. But you never know. To your point, they were way closer to relegation. They have been pulling out. They're only at 23 points to what you're saying, and that's 3 points to relegation and 7 points to our spot. So that's quite a difference. And to the statistics and the numbers that you were showing, you were right. When you look at the goals for, it's almost identical. There's a few more that conceded that they have been giving. But then if you look at the 3 win, draw, and loss, that's where you see the major difference. You have 7 wins and 9 ties and 9 losses for us versus the 3 wins, 14 ties and 8 losses for them. So on the loss side, they're the same, but it's the win versus the tie that makes that big difference, which reinforces perhaps maybe your more or less prediction. But let's go into the predictions, I guess, at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think the breaking down their 3-5-1-1 is going to be the ask. What can we do in order to kind of have a breakthrough in this match? Obviously, this is one that we want to have all 3 points. I think it's something that we hope that we're going to be able to capture. I'll be curious to see how we end up approaching this one in terms of, what are we going to do to kind of get past that group? I think when you look at the last 3 matches as well, I think they only conceded 1, if I'm not mistaken, in that period of time. Maybe they've only conceded, I think maybe 1 in this past 3. And so, we talked a little bit earlier, we didn't really spend a lot of time on it, but Junior Macias really had, I think, probably his best game for us against Napoli. He looked fantastic. I was preferential in our GSR voting. I put Badel as my player of the match. You saw
MVP
some of the
match.
passes that he had made and his involvement in our attacking play seemed like anytime there was something good happening, he was somewhere involved. And so you wonder, can we get he kind of has more of those signature, just breaking up a defense type passes that cuts through 3 or 4 lines. Is it going to be something like that? Or are we going to see Macias with more of his kind of technical ability, and he's got a bit of pace too? I think there are reasons to be excited, but it's still something that's, how do we figure out how we can do this? One interesting fact, I didn't know this, but I guess it does make sense because I feel like we draw with them all the time. We've not beaten Udinese in 13 tries consecutively. Did you know that? So we've in our last 13 matches, we've lost to them 6 times and we've drawn with them 7 times. Of course, our most recent match was also a draw. So obviously, we talked a bit about their form. I don't, like you mentioned, I don't think they're worth taking for granted. But if there's a time for us maybe to get on the opposite side of this, of course, this isn't the Udinese of old with Di Natale and all these other players, or Sanchez, or these other guys you mentioned who've kind of, some of the other players that have come in and out of the squad and moved on. But it's still Udinese and there's still a chance. I do tend to think we might struggle again to a 1-1, but I wouldn't be so surprised actually to see Genoa on top of this one 1-0. For me, the goal scorer, tricky one, I would have to say. We've been missing a Goodmanson goal for a little bit. I think that might be where we get a goal in this game.
I agree with this fact that it's going to be difficult. Cioffi, which is their coach, is not necessarily one of the most famous ones. He doesn't have a good CV to say, but he does show quite that experience when it comes to defensiveness, and hence all the ties that he has collected so far. They're coming hungry for points because they're trying to get away. It's better in a way, their state in form right now compared to before, because they were a lot more, I guess, struggling and without oxygen. Now they're a little bit in a better spot. I said only 3 points to relegation, so it just takes 2 seconds really to go down. But there's also a lot of other teams behind them before they're able to surpass them. That does not mean that Genoa is going to be sitting there and waiting. We had these last 2 matches, a loss and a tie. We're back on the positive form with the tie against Napoli at Napoli. Mm-hmm. Now we're at home. We're in the tempo. We're with the 12th man. This is the stadium where everyone fears us, especially some sort of a vindication from the first leg. It's in play here, and I think that we're going to see a totally different match compared to the structure and the tactics that we've seen against Napoli. It'll be more, in my opinion anyway, something more brave, similarly perhaps to the Atalanta match. And I think we're going to probably see 2 goals, 2-0. The tie that we had at Napoli, with that bitter type of taste that we had with having these 3 points up until the 90th minute. And I think the goal scorers are going to be Retegui, which he needs for the Euro and the Euros, and Vitinha, I think, is going to be also the surprise.
I like Vitinha. I was thinking about him a little bit too. I like that.
I think he needs that too himself too, because that's also why he was sent to us, in order to regain momentum and confidence and so on. All right, so I guess we're at a wrap. One more thing. Sorry, most importantly, this will be match number 120 for our captain Milan Badel. So that's a congratulations. Wow. He is going to be the 5th foreigner when it comes to presence. I think I just heard it today. I'm trying to remember on top of my memory. We have Kuchka and even Juric that are at 125.
Okay.
And then
that's kind of amazing.
And another Croatian too, right?
Yeah.
And but the one that we can't base ever, probably, no, you can never say never, but it doesn't seem like it'll happen. They're like in the 180s. We have, I'm thinking here very deeply, Pandev.
Goran Pandev for sure.
And one more. Oh man.
Not forgotten this. Of course, Skurabi.
Oh shit, that's right. Pandev and Skurabi are up front, but they're with 180 something.
164 for Skurabi, yeah.
So it's going to take up a little bit for our Milan Badel to reach that, but I just wanted to mention this sort of important number. Anyways, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Put likes everywhere, share it with your friends, and drop us any type of comments, DM us and whatnot. But never forget, always and forever,
Forza Genoa.
Forza Genoa. You've listened to La Lanterna, a spotlight on Italian football, a podcast powered by Genoani Si Resta. Thank you for listening and see you next week.